They'd been hiding out for close to a week to avoid detection along the border. This, a first meal without having to watch their backs. A man makes a call to tell relatives he's made it, while others, parched and desperate, take their chance with the filthy water all around.
BBC reporter travelled inside Arakan province to the Muslim villages.
Well, we only got to see a few areas of Mongdor. The extent of the destruction was staggering though, and most of them were Muslim villages. Well, they call this place Lil Tanjore. It's quite close to the coast. And the government's version of what happened here is that it was the militants themselves who set fire to everything here, destroying facilities that were shared by Muslims and some Buddhists here. Now, we can't confirm that, we can't speak to anyone, the place is completely deserted. As we've driven here, we've seen village after village that's completely deserted, abandoned boats, abandoned livestock, rice fields left.
Of all the villages that have been burnt down, have they all been burnt down by Muslim militants? Is that what we're saying? That all of them, 100%?
Just arrived at this village, and as you can see from these fires, they've only just been lit. In fact, we bumped into the people who almost certainly lit them, carrying machetes, not wanting to talk, though one did admit, yes, they'd set these buildings alight with the help of the police, their ethnic Rakhine. This was a Muslim village. Now, the government has claimed that all of the village destruction is at the hands of Muslim militants and Rohingya inhabitants. What we've seen here tells us a very different story, a story of ethnic cleansing, of driving Muslims out of this part of Myanmar.
But some have died seeking sanctuary. This week, a boat carrying 60 Rohingya Muslims escaping Myanmar capsized. 14 perished, most of them children. The new arrivals could end up in one of these, the giant tented camps built in a matter of days on hillsides freshly stripped of trees. The largest will soon become the biggest refugee camp on earth. For the Bangladeshis, the mass influx of so many refugees is difficult to control. After a delay, these Rohingya Muslims should begin moving to an established refugee camp in the coming days.
In the meantime, on the other side of the world, the Islamic Foundation of Toronto in Canada invited federal and provincial MPs to address the crisis that has been created by the military on Rohingya population.
I really thank them for their time, and I also thank all the community for coming here and spending the time expressing their concerns to the politicians, and go from there. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you.
All these petitions I wrote to the Minister for Foreign Affairs and said, this is not acceptable. When you meet her, tell her she is committing crimes against humanity. And if you look at the final result of our collective effort, it's not one person's effort, it is collective effort, you will notice that the Prime Minister did write an open letter to Aung San Suu Kyi, letting her know that what she was doing is ethnic cleansing.
During the meeting, there were many questions and suggestions by the audience to the political leaders.
We need our government to step up in a very substantive way, something with some substance. Because condemnation is one thing, but we need more action. And we did recognize this problem back in 2007, and it's clear we need to recognize it again. Thank you.
And you know it very well that Bangladesh is not a very rich country. But we are rich in humanity. And 160 million people, 160 million people already are living in Bangladesh, and on top of that 1 million. So this Islamic Foundation have been working, I think for 40 years. We are Muslim, but not working for Muslims. We are working always for humanity.
We all clearly said that this is textbook genocide. This is a very well planned killing. How do we stop that? I think we should go one level further to be tougher, just using the soft language at this point. And I think, inshallah, with the concerted efforts of all of us, all the agencies as one unit, and as we say, it is a humanitarian issue, it is not a Muslim issue, that inshallah we will make a difference and we will bring about a change with our united efforts. Thank you.
There were exciting question-answer period, where the MPs took note of all the questions and shared their opinion with the audience. On behalf of Islamic Foundation of Toronto, Shamsul Islam, Khosru Khan and Shakil Akhtar visited Bangladesh to conduct the relief operation. During their visit, Shamsul Islam met the Canadian High Commissioner in Dhaka as well as Bob Ray to discuss the policies and strategies to assist Rohingya refugees.
My first-hand experience when I visited a refugee camp along with my other team members, and the way the Rohingya refugees are living there is absolutely inhuman condition.
Initially, Shamsul Islam and his team assessed the need of materials with the serving Bangladesh Armed Force members and later arranged the materials for the refugees. Packages were produced with essential items to support their daily needs, which included some clothes. During the relief operation, Bangladesh Army was cooperative. With the fundings, 8 trucks of rice was purchased and it was distributed among the refugee families.
The most important thing that now we should do that to do more relief works, to help these refugees to survive and to raise our voice to a greater community as long as they go to their own land with human dignity. It's very unfortunate that Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi received International Award Nobel Peace Prize for her bravery role for the establishment of democratic rights. But today is very unfortunate, the world community is requesting her for the protection of human rights. That's very unfortunate part.
The violent campaign has triggered the fastest growing humanitarian crisis in recent years. But Myanmar's de facto leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Aung San Suu Kyi, has barely acknowledged the attacks.
More than 50% of the villages of Muslims are intact. They are as they were before the attacks took place.
When she says that, 50% of the Muslim villages are still present in Rakhine State, well, what are we talking about? 50% are gone, 50% are burnt out. In any school I went to, 50% is a failing grade.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has appointed Bob Ray as Canadian Special Envoy to Myanmar. Recently, he visited Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh as well as Myanmar to discuss the human crisis.
I think, based on my experience as the Special Envoy, I think there are 3 critical issues that we need to focus on as a country. The first is the immediate humanitarian crisis in the camps and in Myanmar. In the camps, we have better access, so we can see the situation and we can address it as a country by doing more to make sure that the camps are livable, to make sure that we avoid a real serious crisis, either an epidemic or a flooding disaster or something of that kind. So we need to be working hard with all of those people that are working to build the camps and to keep them, to make sure that we're doing as good a job as we can and that we're leaders in this work. And I can tell you, based on my trip, there are so many volunteers, there are so many people who are engaging with the people in the camps, who are providing their expertise as engineers, as doctors, as nurses, as social workers, and they're contributing in every way they can to making sure that we are playing a role in humanitarian assistance. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we really need to pay attention, especially now that there has been an agreement with Bangladesh. We do need to make sure that there are conditions to which people can actually return. And we need to establish some key principles. Any kind of repatriation has to be completely voluntary. There has to be a clear path to citizenship and dealing with the underlying marginalization, the discrimination that has existed in the past. We have to be able to deal with that. And we have to make sure that the report of Kofi Annan that would provide for real efforts at integration and real efforts at dealing with the discrimination in Rakhine State, that those are being dealt with. Now that's going to be a tough challenge because it has been hard for Canada and for other countries to get real access to what's going on in Rakhine State. And I think it's very, very important for us to keep a very, very close eye, a close watch on this process of reintegration. But let's also remember there's still nearly 300,000-400,000 Rohingya who are living in Rakhine State, in central Rakhine State. And their situation is important for us to make sure that the end of discrimination starts and doesn't take forever. And the third big area, of course, is this question of legality and what we call in law the responsibility to protect, the responsibility that the officials in Myanmar have for the safety and for human life. And if there have been breaches of the law, if there's been people breaking the law, then we have to find a way to make sure that they are held responsible. Those three principles, I think, are very, very clear for Canada, and I think Canada can play a positive role.